So Matteo, first things first, how are you?
I'm good. I'm better now after this run. That's an inside joke by the time being. So yeah, I was better a couple of days ago. Now we're all a bit sad for what happened in our country election wise, and we're not supporters. We're just very disappointed, and it looks like a very dark future.
Mm.
I
It's
would
it's
say.
it's difficult to see kind of the positive sides of things at the moment, but whenever kind of these world events happen, in this case it's an Italian thing that happened, but uh, does it seep into the music in some way, either musically just to get some frustration out, or in the lyrics?
It can get in the music. Musically, I think maybe frustration can be turned into something positive with music. Lyric wise, we really try not to talk about politics
Okay.
in our music. We try to keep these arguments separate. Of course, we have a very definite vision or view, but we just decided with all the members that we're not going to go into that with
Fair
lyrics.
enough. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
So let's talk about more happy things then. Your new album has been out now for,
sure.
I believe, around 2 weeks, right? Kind of. So
Yeah, a
what
couple of
has,
weeks. Yeah.
yeah, so what is the feeling right now since it's out? Is it kind of a weight off your shoulders, or how do you feel now that it's out?
It feels fantastic because it's out, and it would, of course, this feeling of having it off your back is coming from months and months ago because the album was completed in early May, I think.
Okay.
So at that point, we were like, ooh, for a second. Now, right now, it just feels like that huge effort because it's always pretty much a year. That's what it takes us, a year to put together
Okay.
an album. Became fruitful because people can hear it out. And
Mm.
I'm very happy that surprisingly, it seems that every comment that we get, or most of the people listening to it, are really understanding what we were up to. Like
Mm.
in the comments, in the reviews, I kind of hear back the kind of dialogues that we had with the band, like inner dialogues,
Okay.
like we're gonna go this way, or we're gonna make this choice, and I'm happy to see that this shines through. For instance, when people say, I'm glad the humor is back on the new album. Yeah, we were feeling it. We were talking about it. We were like, should we let this thing in, flow in the record, or kind of be more, sober like we did in the past? And we decided to let it shine through. So I'm glad that it was delivered.
Mm. Well, that's very good to hear because about 2 years ago, I suppose it would be unimaginable because the world was in kind of a heavy lockdown. There was no
Yeah.
end in sight. Kind of the future was very uncertain. And I believe for you as a band, I'm sure personally as well, that wasn't the most kind of exciting period of your life, and you weren't inspired to write as much. So when did the turnaround come? Because I don't want to talk about the lockdowns and everything too much, but when did you kind of get that inspiration back and that drive to make a new album?
I think 6 to 7 months into the pandemic, after big depression and after not talking much to each other,
Okay.
um, we started feeling like some kind of life flowing back, or at least it was the music talking us into that. I never stopped really writing, but I stopped committing to the band during the pandemic. But if I look back, many ideas on my audio notes, this is usually how we write, like in the middle of the day or the night or whatever you're doing. Then listening back to those things, some of those audio notes are coming from the pandemic moment. They were just not explored until I think it was around July or August of 2021. We felt like, okay, let's fully commit to this thing because life was flowing, things started to change,
Mm.
and yeah, we weren't inside of walls anymore.
Whenever
I think
you
this album was the biggest burst of adrenaline ever because we were rehearsing, like we are rehearsing every second night now to the upcoming tour we're leaving on Friday. And we're
okay.
like, you know what is really missing in the performance? Adrenaline, like that shot of adrenaline that boosts your stamina and gives you that extra speed and stuff. And we were like, all right, we didn't feel this for the past 3 years. Like that substance in our brain and in our body was completely missing.
But that's very interesting that you say
We put
that.
it in the album. Yeah.
Yeah, because a couple of songs, especially that I would say that some of the first half of the album is very intense. Certain songs and very, yeah, well, adrenaline is a good word. So whenever you write, do you kind of what decides what comes out? Is it just your own mindset at the time? Is it do you talk about a lot of stuff that you want to write? Is it very thought out? How do you kind of, what is your method of writing?
Yes and yes to both questions. It's about the phases. So there's a very initial phase that starts with usually I record audio notes on the phone, like I said before. And then I have hundreds of them and I start picking them up and trying to translate some of them on guitar or some virtual instrument on my computer. And if it's words for them to become something, because yeah, most of them, they're just destined to not be, I start talking it over with the band. And if we all get excited, then that is the moment where everybody starts putting in their own inspiration, and that is the moment for dialogue. Like, where do we want to go with this piece? Do you really want it, guys, to be so adrenaline until the end? Yes, let's not compromise it, or let's put in a variant, a bridge that lowers the tensions a bit. But this is pretty much about feeling, and then we discuss it all together. We try and do it, and we try to see if it works, if it applies to reality, that idea. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't. Like, everything sucks, and I'm a big part of it as a song. It took forever. It took almost 6 months. Okay. That song began to be written before the famous July or August that I said, 6 months before.
Right.
And it took so long because we made, I don't know, 15 or 16 versions of the same song, just because we felt either something was missing or something was too much or something. And in the end, nothing was too much. We just put it all inside, and that's why the album is called So Much Too Much. But this big pain and the way it comes back and all these different moments with electronics, there were an amount of hours of dialoguing with each other and have philosophical talks, and how about that. So yeah.
Well, let's get into the let's get into the talks kind of in a minute. But what you mentioned now, I find very interesting, because you guys as a band, you're very good musicians. You can tell by just listening to all the individual instruments and everything that's being played. So for you and then the band as a whole, is it difficult to know what to put in when? Because as you mentioned, you kind of just put everything in, and I think you get away with it with so many layers and everything happening. But it's a tricky thing, I think, because it can be too much sometimes. So how do you balance that?
You're absolutely right. It is difficult. It is difficult, and balancing it out takes a lot of rethinking, redoing, because there are many layers and then there are many changes. And for every change, you have to decide what layer is gonna make a bridge to the other section or not, or if there is an interruption. So it's always about balancing also with the other people, with the guys in the band, whether we want that particular change to strike and be as surprising as possible or being smooth, or most of the time we try to balance it out, because we listen to a lot of progressive music, and we don't like when our colleagues seem to not care too much about transitions, because transition is a very delicate thing. It has to be tasteful, and if it's a matter of bad taste, has to be really thought through. At least this is what we try and do, and we spend huge amount of hours on that. So it's always very calculated, And we always also go back in the songs. So we've done that kind of thing on that song. Let's balance it out with something else here. And we spend a lot of time on building the track list. That is a journey into the experience of the album. So yeah, that is difficult. That is difficult.
But I think you do it well, because if you take a song like Venice Has Sunk, I think the dynamics are really great, where it's sometimes it's really intense, but then there's quieter parts, and then you have that bass solo coming in. So there's all these elements, but they seem to flow into each other well. So was that a difficult song to make?
Venice Has Sunk was medium difficult. It all came out pretty easy, I must say, because that's simply crazy. And harmonically, it's allowing you to go a lot of crazy ways. It doesn't have to make complete sense all the time. So that, despite its complexity, it was a medium difficulty, I'll say. We were allowing ourselves to go like crazy ways. Yeah.
But for instance, with I think it's Ralph's bass solo, right? So
oh no, that's a guest.
Oh, okay.
The bass solo is a guest. So the whole album, the bass player on the whole album, it was me and Ralph, so the two guitarists, plus the sound engineer, who's also a very good bass player.
Okay.
Plus one note, I insisted on that, on our old bass player, Gabriel Pignata, who left the band, but I said, yeah, you're always hanging out in the studio because he's our friend. Like, he's going to come on tour with us now. He's always in the family. He's just not playing anymore. It's like, okay, you're going to record one note, and he recorded one note. So this was the bass playing on the most of the album. But for that song, Venice Has Sunk, we had the honor to collaborate with a guest.
Okay.
And at first, we didn't really know if we wanted to make it public. But yeah, his name is Federico, and is one of the best players in the world right now. Really amazing work that he has been doing. And he didn't even take so long. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, do you just say, okay, now we have about 30 seconds or a minute or whatever, and just do your thing? Is that how something like that goes? Or do you have a talk about what you want to put in and how you want him to contribute to the song?
We knew that he will have that space to lay one of these killer solos on. And he did 8 takes, I think, and he sent us one. So we only listened to the final result.
Okay.
I think maybe later on in the future we may do a video with him as well of that particular song, because it seems like a lot of people are interested in the way it's played or made, because it's mayhem. Right? People maybe want to see what we're doing or not. So we will maybe do a live video of that particular song, but I don't know yet.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think, as I mentioned, you can hear when you just listen to it that you're technically very, very skilled player. So it's interesting how to see how some of that's even when you mentioned the word adrenaline. Sometimes I was listening to the album, I was thinking, how are they playing this live? Because it's so fast and there's so many intricate little lines and stuff. Is that a difficult thing to translate from what goes on the album to kind of sustain that during a live show?
Yeah, I'd say playing in the studio and playing live, it's two different sports completely. Like, in the studio, you have no audience, you have no adrenaline. We mentioned that before. You have no lights blinding your eyes. You have nothing is out of your control. You can stop and stuff. And bringing it live, we're struggling with it now, like rehearsing a lot, and pulling it all together is also very tricky. There's a lot of guitar layers that are in a song, so we record our rehearsals, and then based on what we play, because there's going to be 2 guitarists live, not more than that, we decide what additional layer will go in the sequence or will get deleted. Same with electronics. So we're now really, really, really grinding on the live thing. I hope the show will come out great. But, yeah. I really hope that adrenaline will give us that extra shot.
Yeah, but I think that's the fun thing about playing live as well, right? That you're not entirely sure where it goes, and that you're kind of on that balance between where it can go wrong and where it's perfect. And I think that's what makes live music as interesting as well.
Absolutely. Until it stays
until everything goes wrong
together, until it works.
But there's somebody else on the album.
There is Devin Townsend on the album.
Devin Townsend. So with somebody like that, how does that happen? And what was the relationship with him working on a song?
Our drummer played on Devin Townsend record, and that record isn't released yet. So they had plans together, and they had this project going on. They became friends, and Devin felt like, all right, I can also participate on one of yours. So that was fantastic. We asked for it, said yes, and then he said his condition will be that he would write his own parts, which is amazing. So we didn't write the song together. The song was kind of prepared, and we knew where he could be hopping on and doing his own thing. But about what he would do or not, he had an open call for that. And he's such a creative mind, Devin Townsend, like amazing, incredible. When we went through the number of layers of vocal harmonies that he did, we were absolutely surprised. Like, how can this guy come up with such, interesting harmonies? None of them are conventional. They all fit together. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's very interesting as well, because whenever you work with people who've been around for a long time, and you kind of have their own style of doing things and know how to do things, whenever you work with them, is that like a learning moment as well? Do you kind of look at how they approach music and how they approach songwriting and those kind of things, or is it more separate?
Yeah, I mean, you can grasp what a musician is doing even remotely, and I think this remote thing happens more and more. Like, even as the band members, we have been working remotely for most of this album, because nowadays you can just do it. It's so easy. And I used to think that was a kind of a not letting people understand what was going on, but right now, like, having grown on the language of working remotely, you can really learn from everybody, even if you're not face to face. So in that regard, I think I learned a lot from Devin Townsend. I think I learned a lot from Federico Malaman. And then there are other contributors to the album, which I could work in person because we were set in the same cities, and they're called Christian, both of them, Christian Costa and Christian Gramaglia. And they took care of the electronics of the album. So Chris Gramaglia did most of it, was there since the very beginning, and he did an exceptional job. I mean, the sound of this album is so redefined in terms of electronics, because for the first time we didn't use electronic to be stuck on the top of a perfectly working piece, but we started including its elements way early in the composition. So he also gave some great original ideas that we ended up using. So it was a very organic process, and I learned so much about, computer instruments, software instruments. And the second guy that I mentioned, Chris Costa, was coming a bit later in the process. So he did some additional layers that are absolutely brilliant, such as the end of Venice Has Sunk, or we were recording vocoders together. So whenever there's a vocoder line, it was me at his place because we're actually neighbors. It was a couple of doors away from mine. There was this guy that inside of his place, he has all the equipment in the world. Yeah.
It's lucky, but that's
cool.
Interesting, because you're right. From the moment that you put on the album, you hear these little electronic elements in between, and they don't necessarily take over songs, but there's these computer elements, and kind of you hear these sounds. So, what did you want to have somewhat of a, maybe this is a weird question, but somewhat of a futuristic vibe with some of the songs, or what was the thought behind certain kind of layers, as you mentioned, those kind of computerized sounds.
We wanted to redefine the sound at the very beginning and making it a bit more robot and a bit more cyborg. That were pretty much the words that would come up. And so this was very well thought through. And the 6 months that we used in writing Everything Sucks, and I think I'm a big part of it. That was the first song. They were spent also on arranging and find all these electronics instruments and finding a good, compromise with Chris Gramaglia, the guy that helped us develop this kind of sound. So it was a very long process, and I'm in love with it, man. To tell the truth, I'm really happy about how this sounds right now. It gave a huge contribution to our acoustics.
Well, that's an interesting word to use at the end, acoustics, because then the final two songs are, it's not exactly the final two, but at the end of the album, there is some more acoustic work. And I think by setting up the more electronic things in the beginning, you allow yourself to venture into those areas as well. So
Sure.
What was the thought behind specifically Rimashi and Everything Sucks Less? Because they kind of have this different vibe in a way. Well, let me phrase it very slightly differently. Was that important to kind of have a very diverse album where not where all the songs kind of have their own path to follow?
Yeah, we believed at the very beginning that having a diverse album would resonate better with the moment, because this moment in history is very maximalistic to me, very inclusive, very diverse, and very less conceptual than it used to be even a couple of years ago. So when I say conceptual, I mean packaged and under control, and everything is very coherent. Every part of the work is very coherent to each other. We thought that this particular time will be good for something very diverse and very liberating, free. So you mentioned Everything Sucks Less, which is the last song on the album. It stayed as acoustic as it is. That song came out together with Everything Sucks, and I think I'm a big part of it. So Everything Sucks Less and Everything Sucks, and I think I'm a big part of it. If you listen to it closely, they share the same refrain. So it's absolutely the same part, but is arranged in a way. And at the very beginning, I thought that Everything Sucks Less, this acoustic thing that came before everything, would have played the role of being like a demo of something that then you develop into a song, and then the demo gets erased. So that song became Everything Sucks, and I'm a big part of it. But the original scrape was developed to take its own shape because we thought it deserved to have a position in the album. So this very Beatlesque atmosphere I loved, and we had fun with the lyric also. The lyric is absolutely brutal. It clashes completely with the sweet atmosphere of the music. To be frank, like at the beginning, that song was a love song, and I wrote the lyrics, and they were very lovely. They were no cliche, but they were sweet. And the guys were like, okay, this is a bit too personal, so I took it and I kept it to myself. I told my love, hey, look, this is your version, and you're going to be the only one who's going to listen to this. Sorry about that, because the band wanted so, and we're a democracy. We want to rewrite the lyrics. So we made I took the original lovely lyrics and I changed words here and there to transform it in the brutal beast that is right now. I had an interview a couple of days ago, and the guy told me, hey, look, this could stay, like this kind of lyrics, they could be in a Cannibal Corpse. So if you listen to it closely, I think it's kind of nice.
Yeah, I think it's a great song. Well, the time for the Zoom link is up. So Matteo, may I thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you very much. Really glad to be here with you.